if you've never heard my story before, I'm not going to go into in detail, but all I'll say is that I was very fortunate to have one of my major rock bottom wake up calls pretty early in my life. And it came in a kind of invertly kind of way. And what I mean by that is that everything was going great. Everything was going great. I was in my mid 20s. I was running retreats around the world. I was on TV in over 30 countries. I already had books out like in self-help in that genre with major publishers. My clinics were full. I had more money than I thought was possible. I was driving a Range Rover. I had a fancy pad in Edinburgh. I had a beautiful girlfriend. We were raising a child together. And on paper, everything was great. I'd got my goals. The goals that I thought were impossible, like a couple of years prior, had happened. But here was the problem. I wasn't happy yet. Not only wasn't I happy, I was actually experiencing deep shame because I was secretly struggling, suffering, stressed, anxious. And I was out there sharing with the world how to experience not that. And so I felt really I felt like a fraud. And a lot of stuff was churning inside me. And it led to an argument with my girlfriend whilst we were running a retreat. And we were running the retreat together. And mid retreat, she packed up and flew home. And left me to finish the retreat while she moved out of the house that we'd been living in. And it was like the hardest few days I can remember. And it was just the start of a hard time. And I remember like begging with her on the phone, please don't do this. I'll be back soon, blah, blah, blah. And when I got home on a late Sunday night from this retreat, I walked into this house and there was like a tricycle, like kind of in the hallway. The hangers were all empty. The house had been left. And I thought to myself, I cannot live here. And so I basically went online, found a private let, called them on the Monday and said, I'll take your place. They went, do you not want to see it? I'm like, no, I am, I'll take it. And so I moved into this other place within a few days. And I remember waking up in my new bedroom on the top floor of this Edinburgh tenement block. Nice area, but anyway, that's by the point. And there was a point after a few days where I noticed something massive, which was that I was struggling all day. I was off my food. I couldn't eat. I couldn't hardly sleep. I was very upset. But I noticed that when I woke up in the morning, I had about 3 or 4 seconds of peace. You know that 3 or 4 seconds of peace? You know where you kind of, oh shit. That kind of like, it can be like, maybe it's you different and I shouldn't swear. Sorry, Gene. But I had that 3 or 4 seconds of peace where like until I remembered, and I'd heard a definition about remember, which was remember actually means to reconnect with. Dismember is to disconnect, and remember was to reconnect with. And I could see that there was this mechanism occurring where I was reconnecting with this heavy, horrible sadness and depression and anxiety and upset and worry and fear and all that sort of stuff. But I was reconnecting with it. But I had that 5 seconds. And it also reminded me of a quote by the Buddha that said, no mind, no problem. No mind, no problem. And it became so obvious that despite all my efforts to change my mind was still causing me a lot of heartache, a lot of stress, a lot of struggle. And it turns out I wasn't alone, because when I started researching about this thing called overthinking, ruminating, it's sometimes called in the scientific journals, the studies have found that overthinking is known to increase stress. It's known to increase the likelihood of depression, to reduce our energy levels, to zap our energy, to give us more fatigue, to hinder our creativity and productivity, our ability to connect with other people, and also increase the likelihood of anxiety. And so I was like, well, maybe there's something in this. I also came across a study by Harvard University that was it Stanford or Harvard? One of them. Anyway, one of the two. I can't remember right now. Maybe one of my CAM coaches can tell me because it's in the course. That found that the average person is lost in their thinking mind for about 47% of the day. Thanks, Kimberly. Harvard. So I was right. The average person is lost in the thinking mind for 47% of the day. Now, I think that's a conservative figure. I think it's higher. I think there's a lot of thinking that's actually very subtle and quite unconscious to most people. But let's say that that's an accurate figure, that most people are lost in thinking mind. In other words, the moment is happening, but they're missing it because they are lost in their thinking mind. And we know all we know that's like when we're lost in our thinking mind. Someone can be talking, they stop talking, and we have no idea what they said. And they almost can take offense, but we didn't do it intentionally. We just drifted off into our mind. But we have to either pretend that we didn't and we knew what they were saying, but we usually get caught out, or we have to be honest and say, oh, sorry, I have no idea what you just said. But that's massive. They were there. They were talking. You could hear them, but you weren't hearing them. You could see them, but you weren't seeing them. Okay. And it just hit me one day when I was like, I don't want to be lost in my thinking mind for 50% of my day. like life is important to me. I dedicated my life to this self-help stuff and this personal development stuff because I wanted to make the most of life. I wanted to maximize every moment. But how could I do that if I was lost in my thinking mind? 50% of the day, lost, gone, never missed. You missed it. Whoops. That's 50% of a week. That's half of a month. That's half of a year. And it does add up to half of a lifetime. Lost, gone. It happened, but we weren't there for it. And usually it's not just we're not there, we're somewhere else in our mind, talking to ourselves, in our imagination, dreaming up worst case scenarios, worrying about stuff that often never even happens, dwelling on stuff that's long gone, but we're still suffering and struggling from it. So it's not just that we're missing life. It's also the byproduct of that mechanism of missing life is we end up suffering. We end up struggling. We end up with much more stress. And with my fascination, the mind-body connection, and in the understanding that it's been proven that the mind and the body does not know the difference between real and imagined, I would just start to think to myself, how much harm am I doing my body due to this mind-body connection? If I'm spending half my day in dark, stressful, negative thoughts. And then I thought, well, I should think positive. Positive thinking. And then I heard a stat that said the average person's having over 10,000 thoughts a day. I'm like, how am I going to change that? Because even if it's like 50-50 on average, I'd have to try to change maybe 5,000 thoughts in a day. Like I didn't have time. I already had stuff to do. And I didn't want to be spending my whole life looking in my rearview mirror at the previous thought and trying to positize it. It just seemed really tough. And it made me feel like a bit like a failure that, if I was having negative thoughts. Well, long story short, through my investigations, explorations, and my own stress suffering and revelations, it's become clear. The good news is we don't have to positize, for want of a better word, our mind in order to experience a uplifting life, a fulfilling life, a peaceful life, a positive life. And thank goodness for that, because it's a mammoth task to try and change all these thoughts and turn that ship around. The good news is that you can learn how to have a healthy relationship with your mind. You can learn how to engage your mind like a tool, whereby as you pick it up, you use it and you put it back down and you return to something quite precious. Peace. It turns out, I know this is hard to believe, but it turns out you can live in peace for the majority of your day and pick up the mind when it's useful. You can tune out all the bad news. You can tune out all the negativity. It's not even like you have to tune it out. When you apply what I'm going to share with you in this retreat, the mind just isn't going to be here. And you're going to start operating from a different level of consciousness. A level of consciousness where you can operate from inspiration and intuition and instant knowing and wisdom and clarity and calm. It's quite remarkable, really.